Welcome, everyone. We're so glad that you all could join us, and we hope that everyone is healthy and safe. Our panelists and the rest of the Archetype crew are all very excited to share with you some valuable experiences, lessons learned, and advice regarding being a leader in the workplace. My name is Kate Perschke. I am a rising senior at Georgetown University studying accounting and physics, and I spent the summer as an Archetype intern working with the strategy and consulting team. For anyone who may not know, Archetype is a consulting and venture capital firm based in Philadelphia, although obviously everyone is remote right now. Our various functional teams help mid-market companies that focus on workplace health, wealth, and performance, and it's been a great place to work for the summer. But the transition from being a student to being in the workplace, whether for an internship or a full-time job, is always difficult. The process of applying, interviewing, networking, and eventually finding somewhere that's a good fit is long and hard. And now add in a pandemic and an economic recession. Not only does this result in significant physical barriers, it instills extreme uncertainty into every step of the process. The 5 Archetype summer interns understand what these challenges are like as students trying to navigate this virtual environment. We're extremely grateful that Archetype has taken so many steps to ensure that we have a good experience this summer, but even with these efforts, a virtual internship is unique. It can be difficult to build relationships with coworkers without meeting in person and without the casual conversations that happen in the office. It can be hard to gauge one's performance if structured feedback sessions are not in place. Additionally, it can be hard to build strategies to stand out in the workplace, particularly in a more entry-level role. So we're hoping to help with some of these challenges today. We have an amazing panel of Archetype leaders coming from all areas of the business ready to share their insights. We'll cover different ways to demonstrate leadership, advice on finding and succeeding in virtual internships, and more. We hope that you find this helpful. The event will last an hour and will be divided into 3 parts: a guided panel discussion, followed by a speed round of questions for our interns, and then finishing up with a Q&A section with questions from the audience. We encourage you all to send in any questions you might have for our panelists, any specific topics you might want to hear about, inquiries particular to one role or experience, or advice regarding a certain aspect of remote work and leadership. These can be sent in via the Zoom chat feature, and we'll try to get to as many as we can. One last housekeeping item before we get started. For anyone who would like to rewatch parts of the event or anyone who can't make part of the panel, we'll be sending out a recording tomorrow. Watch out for that recording and for further info regarding Archetype events, social media, and updates on recruiting. So now let's get to the stars of our show, our wonderful panelists. Joining us today, we have Dana Crook, our Chief Operations Officer, Danielle Croswell, one of our software engineers, Antonia Dean, one of our engagement managers, and Max Waxman, one of our analysts. I'd also like to introduce my fellow interns who have all put in a lot of time and effort to make this event a success. We have Alex from American University, Sam from Lehigh University, Joseph from Princeton University, and Juliana from Scripps College. We'll be hearing from each of them in a bit. So before we get started, we'd just like to thank our panelists for taking the time to be with us today. We know that you all have very busy schedules, so we really appreciate it. So to start off, let's hear a bit more from each of our panelists about their role at Archetype. So if I can ask you all to go around and just give us a little insight into what you do in your role, what it's like, and a little bit about how you practice leadership every day in this role. So Antonia, do you want to start us off?
Sure. Hi, everyone. As Kate said, I'm Antonia Dean, and my role at Archetype is as an engagement manager. And so what that means is I'm working on the consulting side of our business. At the earliest stages, I'm working on our business development and prospecting and making sure that we are finding the right kinds of companies that fit the profile of the kinds of clients that we like to work with and that we're able to really deliver a ton of value for. And then once they come on as one of our consulting clients, my role is to really help manage the engagement completely through to the end. So it's a lot of project management, working across the different functional teams, working with the client side, working with executive leadership on both sides to make sure everything is happening on time, under the budget that we've set, and that we are delivering the value that we've promised and truly trying to exceed our clients' expectations.
Fantastic. I think I'll jump in next. Thanks, Antonia, for kicking us off. Hi, everyone. My name is Dana Crook, and I'm the COO here at Archetype. And what that means is I lead all things operations, right? What are we doing? How are we doing it? How do I make sure that our team has what they need, whether that's people or tools or other trainings to actually get the job done, deliver amazing work for our partners, and drive value for our venture fund. So really can be a pretty varied day on any given day, whether that's having meetings with the team, building strategic priorities, or trying to fix somewhere where we've hit a roadblock and we need to find a new way forward.
So, thanks, Dana. I can take over here. Hi, everybody. My name is Danielle Crosswell. I'm a software engineer here at Archetype. So really what that means is some of my role is software development, but a good portion of it is working as a Scrum Master. So I work with our different development teams and kind of lead our developers in understanding what needs to get done, what priorities they need to set on their projects, and working with our partners to understand what tasks we need to really be doing. Outside of my technology work, what I love about being at Archetype and on a small team is it gives me opportunities to help build our culture. So you can always find me on a committee or a task force helping add in something new here as well.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us. As Kate said, I am Max Waxman. I'm one of the analysts on the Archetype team. Which means that I work with a lot of our consulting prospects, clients, etc., along different projects. So I've gotten the opportunity to work on both strategy and execution side of things, leading several work streams for one of our current consulting partners in both of those avenues, having discussions and leading those conversations with leadership at our partners, and having the opportunity to wear different hats and really explore areas that I am interested in and Archetype needs help with. So it's been a great experience so far, and excited to talk to you all this afternoon.
Great, thank you guys. So clearly things have changed a lot in the past few months as everyone has had to adapt to the coronavirus pandemic. Given this new, very unique situation, as Archetype has gone virtual, have you faced challenges, surprises, or differences as a leader at Archetype? So just from each of you, just a little bit about how you adapted to these roadblocks and what you learned. So Dana, do you want to start us off?
Sure, thanks, Kate. So really from my perspective, one of the biggest challenges has been how we communicate individually, but also as an organization. You mentioned that you can't have just sort of the drop by the desk conversations. And that was really a central part of how we spread information within Archetype pre-March of this year, right? It was, let me catch them when they drop by. Oh, we need to share something with the team. We all sat in a very open office space. Let's just make sure that we sort of see everybody visually, grab some free time, make an announcement, etc. There are advantages and challenges to that type of communication style in any time, but really switching to virtual made us rethink how we needed to handle that. It really means that we have to be much more purposeful with how we're communicating with the entire organization. How are we going to continue to build those relationships? How are we going to make sure that everybody has the information that they need? I think we've certainly tried to be very purposeful and have set up some all hands meetings to make sure that we're staying connected. But a lot of our solves have involved meetings, which has now sort of gotten us into phase 2 of, okay, how do we free up some of the team's time so that we're still building those relationships, still having those conversations, but maybe having some time off Zoom as well as on Zoom during the day.
Yeah, I think that's a good point, Dana. A large part of our culture is that in-person collaboration. I come at this from a slightly different angle because I'm in a sort of unique position where in my role, I work daily with our offshore development team over in India. So we've kind of set up those norms of communicating virtually. That's not totally something new, but definitely something that's been challenging as well, has been not being able to have in-person working sessions. You know, a lot of our time we're spent sitting at a whiteboard together. And you can't really do that in this virtual world. So I find myself often pointing at screens a lot and realizing the people that I'm talking to can't actually see what I'm pointing at. So it's definitely been a practice in articulation and communication, exactly what we're trying to build out and design together.
For me, I'll say one of the biggest challenges since we've gone to the virtual world is that I joined Archetype after we went virtual. So I've only actually met in person 4 members of the team. And so a lot of, as Dana said, a lot of the way that I have built relationships have been in those casual moments. Oh, I'll walk out and grab lunch with you, or like, oh, let's go get, an afternoon smoothie or green juice, or just, talk about what we watched on Netflix last night. And so in a virtual world, for me, it's been about being more intentional in those moments. And so there are times if I'm leading a meeting and I know that we have a pretty light agenda for the time that we have mapped out, I will, ask everyone to indulge me in some kind of popcorn icebreaker. And Kate is smiling because she's been through them with me. And sometimes it's a question like, what's your favorite vegetable, or which fruit is the most overrated? But it gets people totally thinking outside of the work context, and we all get to kind of learn a little bit more about each other's personalities, so that when there are those tough times, or we are under a short deadline, or there are those like hairy client conversations, we've already built a level of trust in the relationship. So that's been one of the biggest challenges. But I think if you are intentional about that in a virtual environment, you can certainly find other ways to adapt to it.
I'd reiterate a bit here in saying that I think the way we communicate has changed a lot, and you do have to think a lot more about how you're interacting, how you're working with others, both at Archetype and at your clients, because operations for them have changed as well. So one of the biggest adjustments I had to make is with the way that we interact with our client. We're no longer able to go on site, but still have to have that same level of productivity and continue to push things forward. So making adjustments in how we communicate and what those communication norms are has been a bit of a challenge, but we've definitely done a great job in making those adjustments and switches. And the other thing is with the in-person communication on your team, right? It's great to be in an office and to be around all the people who you work with and have those conversations. So to build those relationships with people like Antonia, who I have never met in person, but have really enjoyed working with it's a different experience, and it's been an adjustment for sure.
Great, thank you all. And I can absolutely vouch for Antonia's icebreakers. Also, having met very few people in person, it's been helpful and became a discussion topic with all of my roommates as well about the overrated fruit. So now we'd like to dive a bit more into some more specific experiences and words of advice regarding how to be a leader in an entry-level role, something that is very relevant to many of our audience members, as well as the interns. So we think it would be really valuable to get insight into 2 different perspectives here. So to start us off, Danielle, how can you demonstrate leadership in an entry-level role?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a good question. I'm 3 years into my career, and I definitely feel like I've been given the opportunity to kind of make my mark on Archetype, which is a really cool thing. And I think one of the things that I've learned that sort of got me here is nobody expected me to come into my role knowing everything. It's a lot of learning on the go and being willing to ask questions and be proactive about that. We're a small team, so it's, I think, especially relevant here, but everyone's doing a lot all the time. And if you're sitting around waiting for somebody to give you something to do or give you something you're interested in, it might not fall into your lap. So just being proactive about working with your manager and your team to say, hey, I want to do something. I don't have enough work to do. I want to work in this realm. I think that's pretty effective. And then the other side of that too is just taking ownership of your work. Here at Archetype, one of our core values is be an owner. And I think everyone in an entry-level role here really takes that one to heart, and really owning everything that they do in their work. And I think it's helped us build a fairly effective team of a lot of people who are in the entry-level role, but definitely being leaders on all of the projects that they work on.
Great. And then to get another perspective on this, Antonia, you've been a manager in multiple different roles, including here at Archetype. So in your experience, what qualities and skills do you find successful entry-level leaders possess?
Yeah, I think I would build on what Danielle says, and it's really about being an owner. And I think sometimes, certainly in my career, I for me, I thought like being an owner was just doing everything that someone asked me and making sure that I did that. And I've found that once I started working, and I've seen this as I've managed folks, the most successful entry-level people really take it a step further. So it's not just doing exactly what you're asked, but really thinking about how does the work that I'm being asked to do fit into the overall team goals or the overall project goals, and how can I push it farther? If it's, oh, we need to get an answer to the client by 5 p.m. Can you research it? Sure, it's researching it and then saying, hey, it looks like the answer is, 500. Can I go ahead and send that to the person? And then once you've built that trust with your manager, getting to the point where you're saying, hey, the client asked this question, I researched the answer, I got it right back to them. So it's taking it, one step further. And I think even in situations where you don't know what the answer is, or you're not quite sure what the next steps are, even showing your manager, like, hey, I think these are the two options that are apparent to me. What do you think about that? Is this the way we should move forward? It just helps take one thing off of your manager's plate and really just show that you are like deeply owning the project and care about not just doing what you were asked to do, but care about the success of the project and the team overall.
That's really valuable insight. Thank you. So these understandings of leadership are definitely built off of years of experience and might be pretty different from the ideas that students have. It's pretty common for a first idea of leadership to be this one prominent, naturally gifted individual, because those people are so often put on display as this is a leader, this is what leadership is. But clearly we've already seen that there are a lot of other ways that leadership can be shown and a lot more to it. So Dana and then Danielle, we'd love to hear a bit about how your experiences in the workplace have shaped your idea of leadership. So has your perspective on leadership changed over the years at all, and what caused that? So Dana, if you want to start.
Yeah, I think it's certainly evolved for me in terms of what I think of first and what I emphasize when I'm considering what's important in my leadership and in what I'm looking for from others. Like you said, the easy thing is who's leading from the front, right? Do you have a charismatic leader out front and saying, this is what we're going to do, this is how we're going to do it? I think the first job that I held out of college was opened my eyes to, okay, you don't have to necessarily be that extroverted or visible, but you can also lead through expertise, right? Like if you know how to do something and can teach others, that's a really valued form of leadership, particularly in growing companies when there's constantly training and onboarding to be done. But really what I think is core to how I think about leadership now is really how are we enabling the team to be successful, right? And so sometimes that's by being that person who's out in front saying, this is our goal, this is how we're going to get there, let us define the path forward. Sometimes that's sitting in that expertise role saying, I have this huge depth of experience, let me apply that to this and help the team drive forward. And sometimes that's looking at the larger picture and saying, okay, this is the person that I need to enable, or I can best support the team by doing X, Y, or Z. And I think that third one is one that didn't really become apparent to me until later in my career, but is something that you can do from your first day at your job. Kind of what Antonia was talking about is stepping back, saying, I've been asked to do this, it's part of this bigger puzzle. How can I make sure that my group, my team, my company is successful here? And what can I bring that's unique that'll contribute to that success is really important. And frankly, how we've grown Archetype. As Danielle said, we've got a very young team here that are really helping us do extraordinary things.
Let me just to add on there. I think you guys kind of hit on the main point that, a leader is not necessarily the most experienced person or the loudest person in the room. Coming from me, I am very much an introverted person, kind of hid in the shadows for a good portion of my life until my, perspective kind of changed on what it really means to be a leader. And I think over the years I've learned, especially since college and kind of moving into the workforce, I've learned a lot about how being a good leader means being thoughtful, being empathetic to what the team needs, being able to kind of understand what needs to get done. A good leader is somebody who can acknowledge that maybe they don't know how to do something and they're able to delegate that to somebody else, or find the person who is the right fit for that task. So I think definitely agree with everything that Dana and Kate said to kind of introduce this, but leaders take all shapes and forms. And I think being thoughtful is one of the most important things, and being able to think through the problems, see the best way to get out of whatever situation you're in or solve whatever problem you're trying to solve.
Definitely. Thank you for that. Having only spent a few weeks in the workforce at different times, it's very helpful to get that insight because it is very different than what it's like in college. So thank you. So shifting gears a little bit, we know that right now, one of the biggest challenges for students is getting the opportunity to demonstrate leadership in the first place. So the job and internship search process has always been difficult. I have done it and it's a little bit painful. And the current situation only makes it harder. For example, with a lot of companies switching from in-person interviews where it's easier to communicate and get your personality across to now doing them virtually. So Max and Dana, I know you've both been involved in Archetype's recruiting process. So what advice do you two have for college students looking to stand out throughout this process? Max, let's start with you.
Thanks, Kate. Yeah, it definitely changes being virtual versus in person, but I think there are clear ways that you can stand out in a virtual setting. And I think for me, what is going to be really important is communication. So for an interview at Archetype or another consulting firm, often you'll be faced with a case study, and in person you have the ability to really walk through your work and show the calculations you're doing, thought process behind it, etc. I think that's a lot more difficult over a camera. So when you're having those conversations, when you're going through a case study or even on a behavioral interview, I think you just need to be extra clear and intentional about the way you are presenting yourself, the way you are presenting your thoughts, and how you tie all of that together, because we need to be able to evaluate how you work through problems and how you handle pressure. And I think that's a challenge for both sides of the interview, both the person being interviewed and me as an interviewer. So being clear with your communication and confident in your approach, and just practice is going to make everything better.
Couldn't agree more. I think the basic preparations that Max is talking about in terms of making sure that you know what you're going to be talking about, you've got some confidence walking into that Zoom setting is really helpful. Just like when we're having in-person conversations, your questions are really a great way to stand out as an interview candidate. I think one thing that particularly helps entry-level folks is if you start out asking a question or two about something business related, right? I think a lot of people very rightfully want to understand, what is it going to be like for me to work at this company? And you need to get those questions answered. Those are absolutely essential. But if you start out with something that's, what is it like at this job to do X, or how are you going to accomplish this goal, right? You're focusing a bit more on the company, and that's a bit more unusual. Usually people will start with some more tactical, practical questions. So definitely want to make sure you get those answered as well. But if you can start with something company focused, that'll often get someone's attention.
Great, those are really helpful. And another challenge that might be a little less obvious is finding the right fit or deciding what path to pursue, especially right out of college. Students are often unsure of what opportunities might offer a chance to grow these leadership skills and to learn and to push themselves. Especially right now with just kind of having to do everything virtually, it's hard to get a feel of that. And you've all had experiences that have helped you grow as a leader. So if you could offer some insight, that would be great. So Max and Antonia, what experiences do you feel have been most valuable in building your leadership skills? This can be a specific project or responsibility within Archetype or another role, whatever sticks out to you the most. So Antonia, why don't you kick us off?
Yeah, that's a great question. I would say that the opportunities that have given me the most ability to grow my leadership skills have been the ones where I was simultaneously like, that seems cool, and then also freaking out like, I don't know how to do this, I'm kind of scared, like maybe I shouldn't have said that seems cool, because I find for me that it pushes me to stretch beyond where I currently am. It pushes me outside of that comfort zone, and forces me to flex new skills or to learn new skills and create them on the fly. At my very first job out of school, my manager went on maternity leave when I was 7 months in, and it was a recession. So they decided not to replace her, or not to bring in like someone to backfill the role. So I just had to figure out how to do her job with only like 7 months of experience in. And it was very scary and daunting. But then I realized she figured out how to do her job. Like most of the work that we're doing, unless you are a rocket scientist on the call, most of the work that we're doing isn't rocket science and is just like very, very figure outable. And so I have grown as a leader when I've trusted myself that I may not know what this is right now, but I'm smart enough to know what questions to ask and resourceful enough to seek out the answers, and that I will figure this thing out.
I'd add to what Antonia is saying and just say that for me, it's about seeking out opportunities to exhibit and practice leadership. I think in a role at a company like Archetype that's very quickly growing, very multifaceted, there's not going to be a shortage of opportunities to exhibit leadership and take on those roles. And you're going to find those experiences at larger organizations as well. So I think it's about finding areas that you're interested in and really digging into that, because you're not going to come into an internship or come straight out of college into your first job and know exactly what's going on, or even know exactly where you want to focus. So I think as those opportunities come up, as it becomes more clear to you where you find interest in what you're doing, I think you do have some autonomy in how you drive the direction of your career, your day-to-day work, and anything related to that.
That makes a lot of sense, and that's really good to hear, especially with things changing so much right now, that even if it's not the role that you originally pictured yourself in or that you were originally looking for, there are probably a lot of opportunities to become a leader and seek out those opportunities within that on your own. So thank you, Max and Antonia. So this has all been so helpful, and we have one more question before we'll switch over to our intern round and then some Q&A. So we know that a lot of our audience members have been dealing with a lot of uncertainty and new challenges as internships have gone remote, have been shortened, or just have changed in general. It's something that came through a lot in the questions we received in the event signups, so we think this will be very helpful. So just to wrap up, what one piece of advice would each of you give to college students who are looking to stand out as a virtual intern? Danielle, why don't you start us off?
Sure, I'll probably say more than one thing because there are so many. I mean, just looking back at everything people have been talking about so far throughout this panel, you know, being proactive, being an owner. I think it's important to touch on asking for what you need. You know, we're in a virtual world, everything is different. If you need to, you know, go out in the middle of the day and you want to get a run in or go grocery shopping, you know, it's totally within reason to ask for that. So I think it's really important to remember that we're all people, and it's good to ask for things that will help you to succeed. And then additionally, just learning the team culture, participating, you know, being on Zoom is weird for everybody. Nobody likes being in large group meetings. So it's always a good thing to just get to kind of embrace that awkwardness, unmute your microphone, participate in meetings, social activities, and do what you can to just become part of that culture for as long as you're working in that role.
Those are really great lists. I would add on, ask for feedback when you're asking for things, right? Starting in a new company, again, virtual or not, is always a challenge, because not only are you trying to figure out what you're doing, to Antonia's earlier point, but you're trying to figure out how these people work together. What are the norms? What's cool? What do I not even need to ask about? What are they expecting of me in this meeting? What does good look like? All of those things, right? And that's hopefully feedback that you'll get proactively, but regardless, ask for it, right? Making sure that you're getting out in front of it and telling the people that you're working with, I'm serious about getting better and being great at my job, like help me do that. This is where I think, you know, I am looking for feedback, but also, is there anything else I should know, right? Opening up that conversation really shows a lot of maturity, and frankly is going to enable you to make sure you're doing the behaviors that they're expecting of standout interns.
I'd echo that and wholeheartedly agree with you, Dan. I think on top of feedback, just asking questions when you're unsure or when you want to know more, I think that will put you ahead of the curve, help you really stand out and make you better at your job as well. No one's going to knock points off of whatever proverbial score you have because you didn't know the answer to something for a job that you've just started and a role that you've never been in. So don't be afraid to ask those questions. And another piece of advice, which Danielle touched on, is try to engage with people as much as possible. We've talked about how now that we're not in office, you don't have those water cooler conversations where it's just a one-off or you don't get to go to lunch, things like that. But I think it's important to build those relationships because these are people who you work with and who you're going to continue to interact with, and you want to have that trust and foundation that allows you to work effectively together. And so being intentional about trying to meet new people, trying to engage with everyone in the organization, not just people directly on your team, will really help.
I had 3 answers prepared for this, and 2 of them just got said. So I'm glad I came up with 3 after you asked this question, Kate, because I was going to say ask for feedback and get to know people. And the third one, which I'm glad I still am able to say, is have a goal for your internship for yourself. And a goal in terms of what you want to learn and what kind of experiences you want to have. Many folks go into an internship with the goal of, I just want to get an offer at the end of the summer, and that can be great if it's a good fit. But if you start working there and you realize the kind of work isn't the right fit for you, or the team isn't the right fit for you, or it's a virtual environment, but if it becomes in person, if you're like, the city isn't the right place for me, have a goal in terms of what it is you want to learn, the experiences you want to have, and be explicit about it and say, I'm really interested in your company and this team for these reasons, and I would love to have projects that will allow me to flex my data skills or allow me to think more strategically in creating frameworks, or that will require me to project manage. I would think of what kind of hard skills or work skills and experiences you want to get as an intern, and then be explicit about asking for them. That does show leadership, because to Dana's earlier point, it will impress on the other person, this person really wants to get great at their job, and they are already aware of the areas where they need to grow a little bit more. So don't be afraid to ask for specifically the kinds of projects or experiences that you're focused on getting during your time as an intern.
Thank you. Those are definitely all things that I've felt in the past. So it is very helpful to have that advice, particularly about large Zoom meetings being awkward, because that is definitely true. And stepping up is something that needs a little push sometimes, but always works out. So thank you all. I know I'll be trying to put those to use. And now, before we get to some audience questions, we want to do a quick speed round with our wonderful team of interns. So I will ask all of the interns to join us on screen here. Panelists, you're welcome to stay or go, but while we're doing this, audience members, please send in any questions you might have for our panelists, and enjoy getting to know us. So let's start it off with Sam. How have you made the most of your virtual internship?
Yeah, thanks, Kate. I think I want to kind of split this into sort of 3 things that I've been kind of trying to focus on. The first thing that got said by a lot of the panelists I want to echo is trying to get to meet people as a virtual intern. Especially when you're an intern, you only have 8-10 weeks to get to meet a bunch of people in a company and grow relationships with them. When it's virtual, it becomes even harder because, as I think Max said, no water cooler conversations. So you really have to take the deliberate time to set up meetings with them, talk to them for half an hour, and just get to know them. It's not the same as getting to talk to people just randomly, but it really helps and allows you to grow your experience and your repertoire with everyone. I really would recommend it to everyone. For me, the number 2 thing that I really like, or have had to focus on in this internship, is setting yourself up in a proper work environment. I think that that's something that's really crucial. If you don't have access to it, it can be really hard. For me, I need somewhere where I'm focused in my work. That means I wake up every day, get showered, get out of my bed, don't take my Zoom calls from bed, because being in that proper work environment really gets me in the zone to do my work and not sort of slack off. I think that that's really useful. And even if it's just a small part of your room, like one desk or anything you can do to separate it from the rest of your life and keep it just the work area. And then finally, I think this goes sort of hand in hand with that second thing. I really think it's important to keep yourself away from distractions as a virtual intern. Obviously, we're not in an office and your phone's right there, your family's there to talk to you, or you could literally just go out and do whatever you want. It's really important to keep yourself focused on the task at hand. Some simple things that I've used, and that some of the interns I know have talked to, is even just setting up a timer to keep yourself focused for 20 minutes, half an hour. That's really useful because then instead of saying, oh, I have 4 hours that I have to do this work for, you'll be less likely to procrastinate and more likely to say, oh, I only have to focus for these 20 minutes. But yeah, I mean, I think the virtual internship is a weird thing, but it's something that everyone can get used to and take different skills that they need to get out of it. And I think one of the things I've liked virtually has been the virtual archetype events. So I kind of want to ask Alex, what was your favorite virtual thing we got to do?
Totally agree with you there, Sam. Archetype does a lot of team building events and fun things outside of work, including a virtual quizzo night. And early on in the internship, the interns were paired up with one another. We ended up on the same team against some of the full-time staff members in a virtual quizzo night. And so we ended up having to answer some fun trivia questions that flexed our knowledge on, a number of pop culture and historical categories. And that was really great for bonding, both amongst the interns internally and with some of our more senior, counterparts. We engaged in a fair bit of friendly banter that really got to show the Archetype competitive spirit. There's a real work hard, play hard culture, and it's shined through even in the virtual environment. We did end up catching a 1-point L on a buzzer beater final Jeopardy question. We wagered one more point than the full-time members, and that's where their experience really shined through. We were too much of rookies to know. But speaking of experience, we've gained a lot of it this summer. And Juliana, I wanted to ask about any ways in which you've been able to demonstrate leadership in your role as an intern during your time at Archetype.
Thanks, Alex. So at Archetype, I practice leadership by working actually as project manager for this Zoom webinar. So I've worked closely with my 4 other fellow interns this past 5 weeks to both design, plan, promote, and execute this whole webinar. And I'm really proud of all the work that we've done, and I think everyone else is as well. So I didn't really know what a project manager was before I started Archetype, and in this role, I've kind of learned that it really means to act as a resource to enable the success of your team. So provide them with the framework of the project and basically walk them through every single step of the way and assign tasks and help them along the way. And I think I've definitely learned a lot in this role and just want to share a few key takeaways that I've learned. So number 1 is definitely to figure out and utilize the strengths of your team and ask what they are interested in working on, because if they're interested in it, they're going to be so much more excited to help. And secondly, establish communication norms with your team on how often you'll meet, how you'll turn things in, and how you'll receive feedback as well. So I'm going to throw it back to Kate. What has been your favorite part of Archetype culture?
That's a tough one because there are definitely a lot of great things. But one thing that really stands out to me about the culture is one of Archetype's values. So to explain a bit, Archetype has a list of values that it uses to guide decisions and actions. And one of these values that I think actually Danielle mentioned earlier, and maybe someone else, is being an owner. It's something that's really special about Archetype, and it really encourages all members of the Archetype crew to take responsibility for their work, to take on a leadership role in different ways, like we've been talking about for the past 40 minutes, and really just to own what they've been working on. And it's something that I've really seen shine through even in just my 8 weeks at Archetype. It's very clear that everyone cares about the projects they're on, that they're unafraid to speak up and to take initiative and to take on responsibility that oftentimes in other companies would be left to more senior employees. So that's been really unique and cool to see. And I even felt it as an intern because I feel that I've been given responsibility for important work that actually matters.
I've been expected to lead it, to experiment with it, and to then go and work with my team to make it better. And I've been expected to take initiative on things. It's something that I don't think is at every company, so really makes Archetype special and has made this summer really great specifically. On the other hand, another part of Archetype culture that is just as fun and probably more interesting to listen to is the weekly snack boxes that we've been getting in the mail. It's a great gift every week. It just has a few different snacks for the week, and it's a very interesting mix of things. So to wrap up the intern Q&A portion of this, I want to go around and ask everyone, what is your favorite snack from the snack packs? I know it's a hard question, but Sam, let's start us off.
So many choices, but my favorite has to be the beef jerky. It's so good. So good.
I got to second Sam's comment there. The Righteous Felon beef jerky packages that we get every week. There's a new flavor seemingly in every package, and Truffalo Soldier has been my all-time favorite.
I wish I liked beef jerky, but those are some funny names. I personally really like the cauliflower pretzels. They don't come every week, but when they do, I get very excited.
I personally am a huge fan of the Tate's cookies mini packets that come. They've only come like twice, but every time I have been so excited when I open the box. Something that everyone who lives in my house can attest to. All right, well, thank you all for giving us a neat insight into what an Archetype internship experience is like. So now we're going to switch to some questions from our audience. I'll ask the panelists to come back on, and we'll go to some of the Q&A questions we have here. Okay, great. So one question that we have that I'm feeling a lot of people are also wondering is, how do you express what you've learned in a virtual internship on your resume, even though you didn't actually be in the office, you didn't get hands-on experience? What's the best way to express that? And then along with that, if an internship was canceled and no longer happened, but you put in all the hard work of making it there and getting that offer, should that be added to your resume? How should you convey that in further job searches? So Antonia, if you have any insight on this, that would be much appreciated.
Sure. I would say first, the first part of the question, how do you put what you learned on the resume if you didn't get hands-on experience? I would push back and actually say just because you are virtual doesn't mean you didn't get hands-on experience. If the work was done, then you got the experience of having done that work. So I would frame it the same way that you would have if you had been in an in-office internship environment. And there are a lot of resources online, but there are some great ways where you can frame kind of like the bullet points on your resume, where you say what you did, you say why it was important, and then you say how you actually achieved it. And so I would focus on framing my internship experience in that same way and just kind of consult some of those resources and the best way to actually spell that out. To the second question, in terms of if you secured the internship and ultimately it was canceled, that's a really tough challenge, but I would say I think you should include it on your resume. I would put it in the skills or additional information. I wouldn't put it down under the experience because it's not an experience you had, but you can note it there the same way that you would note if you had won an award and say, you know, like secured, you know, summer internship at XYZ company, you know, ultimately canceled due to COVID-19. But if you did the work to secure it, I think it's worth putting it on there. And I think especially given kind of, you know, what we expect this job market to look like, you should take credit for at least, you know, that achievement, even if you weren't able to actually do the work and get the work experience from it.
Great, thank you. Another one we have is, how do you answer the question of what leadership roles you've been in when you don't really have an official leadership title? So this happens a lot in college, in school, in different places. So Dana and Max, I know you've both been involved in the recruiting process. Do you have any insight on this?
Sure, I'll happily start off if that's okay with you, Max, because I would relate it back to some of the different leadership styles that we were talking about earlier. You don't have to have that official title to be able to talk about your leadership experience. It's what did you contribute to the group, right? Like that's really what a potential employer is trying to understand. And frankly, that's a lot of the questions that we're asking when we see a leadership title on a particular organization. It's what did you do? What were your responsibilities there to separate out what the team did versus what you contributed? So I wouldn't get too hung up on not having okay, I wasn't an officer in X, Y, or Z, right? How do you frame the experience that you brought as a participant or a contributor in terms of the value that the organization got from it, and frame it that way?
Yeah, I agree with you entirely, Dana. I don't think your title matters in this at all. It's about your contributions and the way you approached your work, whether that be at an internship, in a job, or even at school. I think you can demonstrate the way that you've leaned into areas where you find interest and where you're able to contribute and be a valuable addition to a team or to a project. I don't think having a leadership title is the quality that makes you a leader. It's just a little word. So yeah, I think you can do it and demonstrate it in the way you work and how you've been able to grow.
Great. And kind of continuing with this, how to prepare for finding an internship, finding a job. We had a question come in that was, do you believe there's a need to do virtual programs or certificates during this quarantine period to help with the job search? This student asked because it seems like it's a lot of pressure along with online classes and the job search itself. Obviously a lot going on right now. So do you think this gives a leg up? Is it something people should be doing? Again, Dana or Max, I know you just answered that one, but if you're involved in the recruiting and would want to give insight, or anyone else who wants to hop in.
Max, I'll let you start this one, sir.
Sure. As far as the virtual certificates, things like that, I think if they're of interest to you and you think they'd be valuable for you and help you, then yes, by all means, go for it. I don't think that it's necessarily an expectation that an employer is going to be looking for, because again, everyone's in this new setting. Everyone understands the challenges that you are going to be facing as a student or in an internship, as in a job. And so if you think you'll benefit from it, I don't think it would ever be counted against you, but I don't think it's an expectation necessarily.
I would plus one to Max's point there. An exception might be as you get on the more technical end of the spectrum, right? If you're trying to differentiate yourself and show that, okay, I have particular experience in a given language that maybe I wasn't working in college, but I see that, you know, I'm applying to a lot of, Danielle, you'll jump in if I misspeak here, but Microsoft shops, so I'm going to need to get, you know, more practical experience in C# or something like that, right? That's going to be directly applicable to your role as soon as you start and might help with the onboarding process. That feels like a nice to have, but again, unless it's listed on the job description as a requirement, I think Max's guidance in terms of align your interests with what's out there, see what's going to benefit you as a person and as a professional, and use that as your primary stick for measurement versus worrying about whether this is an additional requirement you're going to need to find a full-time role.
Gotcha, that makes sense. So now switching gears a bit to Archetype and virtual work and things like that, we have a question of, how has your team built up morale and approached those more casual work events that help build relationships? So for example, how do you get people to attend the fun events that we have? As we mentioned, Archetype has a lot of them. But it is true that after a long day of work, hopping on another Zoom call is sometimes kind of tough to convince people to join. So I know, Danielle, you've been involved in planning some events. So do you want to start off this one?
Absolutely. And it's hard. A lot of, you know, we try to plan these events trying to replicate the in-person culture, but after being on Zoom all day, nobody really wants to get on Zoom again. So I think we found a couple of things that have been fairly successful for us as a team. One of them is being fairly purposeful in the meeting. So just putting general informal hanging out on the calendar, people won't join those. But when we make it about something, so you may have noticed that the Archetype team can be a little bit competitive sometimes. So when we put on things like virtual quizzo or other types of game nights or tournaments, or activities like that, people tend to be a little bit more excited about joining when they're a little bit more interactive and you're not just 20 people sitting in one Zoom room together. And then I think on top of that, just keeping our relationship building and culture alive, we've been trying to do things that aren't on Zoom. So again, on the competitive theme, we're currently participating in a wellness challenge. So, trying to encourage people to get outdoors and be active while also fighting to be the winner. And we have a Slack channel where everyone posts all of the fun things they're doing with some nice pictures. So that's been a great way to keep our team morale up, even if it's a picture of something in your apartment because people aren't going to many places. It's still helping us build those relationships and keep an eye on what's going on to replace some of those in-person 5-minute chats that you might have about the pastry you baked last night. Now we're all just seeing it in Slack.
I will agree. The Slack channels have been very helpful in helping us feel like part of the culture too. And really, it's hard to set aside time for casual conversations. So that has helped a lot. And obviously the Quizzo nights, as Alex mentioned, were fantastic. Okay, we've got another one about a little bit more of the uncertainty of right now. So one question that I imagine a lot of people are having is with the uncertainty of return offers, or if internships were canceled with the hopes of return offers in the future. And just if your internship was canceled, you haven't had that experience, do you have any tips for navigating the uncertainty of starting a job without having the internship before, or navigating the uncertainty of will these offers come, things like that? So Antonia, I don't know if you might have some thoughts on this, or anyone else.
Sure. So I think I think these are truly like understatement of the century. These are uncertain times. And so I think that's totally natural reaction to have. And so if your internship is canceled and they said, but next summer you can start full time, and that's not been 100% reassuring, then I think you can reach out and actually ask and say, hey, so just wanted to confirm that this is still the plan, or is there something that I should be doing over the summer that would set me up for success to start this role full time next summer? I think just being in steady communication with whomever gave you that that offer to return next summer is helpful. And if your concern is, well, if I haven't been an intern, am I going to be able to do well in that role? I will tell you, I think that I have not met the company where they never hire someone who hasn't been an intern. There is always someone that comes in and has had a different experience. So I would just take that pressure off a little bit, but also ask and say, are there things that I could work on during the school year or over the summer that would mimic the kinds of experiences and learnings that I would have had as an intern, so that I can start and be prepared? Are there things that I can read, videos that I could watch, meetings that I could, watch the recording of or join in on, just to start to help to orient myself? But I think because it is uncertain, everyone will extend you a good amount of grace for having more questions than what would typically be expected for a new hire.
Great, thank you. That's very helpful. And then kind of along those lines, we had a little bit of questions about what can college students do to stand out? You try to be involved in things, take on leadership roles, but in this very competitive internship search, any of you guys, what do you think would help a college student stand out right now? What should they work on to really have something to bring into an interview, have something to put on their resume? I don't know who wants to take it, but if someone has any thoughts.
I can take that. I think it's a lot of the same, honestly, that it has been. I don't think the fact that we're virtual changes it all that much, but I think just trying to be involved, as you said, Kate. There are no shortage of opportunities at school to get involved with something you're interested in, and I think that's important because we want to see that you're interested in taking on those roles and doing things outside of the classroom, outside of a research project or whatever it is that you do in your day-to-day, and that you have these passions that you want to explore. I think that's a very important skill quality for anyone to have joining the workforce, is that we want to see that you're interested in learning. We want to see that you want to do more. and that you want to have those opportunities to demonstrate that leadership. And I think a lot of that can be shown in how you approach your time in school.
And something else I would just add on to that as well, something we've been talking about internally, is taking obligations and turning them into opportunities. So, you know, right now you're in a virtual world, you maybe can't do some of your extracurriculars or hang out with friends or do some things that you normally would do at school. So maybe don't look at that as the bad thing of, oh, I can't do these things. Maybe another opportunity has opened up or another door has opened for you that you wouldn't have been able to do this thing before. And now you're kind of taking this time that you have and actually participating in something that you maybe wouldn't have participated in before. So definitely seizing any opportunity that you can and kind of looking at things on the glass half full as opposed to half empty side.
That's really good advice. Thank you. Well, it looks like we are pretty much at the end of our time here. So I want to say thank you to our amazing panelists for being here today and for sharing such valuable advice with us all. We really covered some great topics, and I'm sure your insight will be put to good use. I'd also like to thank our audience for joining us. We hope that you all found this helpful and that you enjoyed hearing about their experiences in and perspectives on the remote workplace. We hope that you'll stay engaged with us after this event and encourage you to follow us on Instagram, Twitter, and LinkedIn to stay up to date on events and upcoming job openings. Our handles are in the chat, I believe. They were just posted, as well as in the email that you got when you registered for the event. Most importantly, keep an eye on our Instagram story as the interns do a takeover tomorrow to get a little taste of what it's like to be an Archetype intern. And then for the next few weeks as Archetype crew members continue to do it just to see what it's like to work here. They can all be found there. And thank you so much for coming. Keep an eye out for an email tomorrow with the recording of this event as well as a survey for feedback. And please let us know how we did. We hope that you all stay healthy and safe and that we see you at the next Archetype virtual event. Thank you.